The purpose of this guide is to show Atlas mechanics and how to use them to progress your Atlas. The guide is created mainly solo fun in mind, as in trade leagues you can just buy all the maps. However, there should be useful information and tips included even for players who do buy maps. Please check the description as it includes timestamps, a written guide, and other useful links. The guide is divided in 4 different parts. Part 1, rules of obtaining maps and memory fragments. This is the most important part of the guide, and if there was one thing you should watch about the guide, it's definitely this section. Part 2, tier by tier method, which showcases the very basic ways of progressing your Atlas. Part 3, map by map method, which is an extended and better way of progression compared to the tier by tier method. And part 4, tips and other ways to progress, which includes what if cases and a cool trick on how to obtain memory fragments. Most of the things included in the guide are recently tested to guarantee that they are correct. However, there is always a chance that something gets changed or something was a bug and it got fixed. So if you spot any mistakes, please let me know so I can add a correction. All mistakes will be added to the end of the description, so another good reason to check that out. To keep things clear, when I refer to unlocked or unlocking maps during this guide, that means to have a map in your Atlas in a state where it does not have any Atlas bonus, but it can drop. Locked means that the map is in a state in the Atlas where it's grayed out and you cannot find it while doing maps on the other side of the Atlas. Completed or completing means that a map that is not only unlocked, but it also has the Atlas bonus, which increases the chance that whenever a map drops, it drops as a higher tier. Usually, when you're running your maps, you aim to not only unlock, but complete them at the same time, as white, so tier 1 to tier 5 maps, require the map to be only magic to be completed. Yellow, so tier 6 to 10, they require the map to be rare. And then the reason why you don't usually try to complete red maps straight away is that not only the map has to be rare, it also has to be corrupted. And one of the outcomes of corrupting a map is that it turns into a +1 adjacent map, which means if you corrupt a T11 map, which is the first red map, it can turn into a T12, which means that you now cannot complete or even unlock the T11. In order to understand how to ideally progress the Atlas, we first need to know how we can obtain maps in the first place. This part is the most important part about this guide, and by understanding even half of it, will make understanding Atlas now and in the future a lot easier, especially if things change. This part is further divided into 7 smaller parts, which are locked maps, unlocked maps, Zana, upgrading maps, corrupting maps, other ways of obtaining maps, and then finally memory fragments. Locked maps, or maps that are grayed out in your Atlas, drop when running adjacent maps to them. This is very important to understand, as we will be utilizing this rule the most in order to get a proper Atlas bonus and obtaining maps in general. Unique maps can only drop if the base map for it is unlocked. So for example, Dead End Access won't drop naturally if you don't have Necropolis unlocked. You can still obtain them through other like ways, for example divination cards, but more about that later. Unique maps are adjacent to its base map, so Necropolis can drop while you're doing Dead End Access. You can lock /uncomplete a map that is currently unlocked /completed by using a cartographer seal on the map on your Atlas. The orb is obtained by trading 3 sextants, so apprentice, journeyman or master, and a orb of scouring to a vendor. Depending on what sextant you traded, you will then receive Apprentice Seal, Journeyman's, or Masters. Apprentice Seal will be able to lock tier 1 to tier 5 maps, Journeyman will be able to seal tier 1 to tier 10, and then Masters will be able to seal tier 1 to tier 16. When a map is about to drop, the game first checks if there are available maps in that tier's pool. If there are maps available in that tier, it randomly picks one of those maps. If there are no maps in that tier, the game downgrades the map by a tier at a time until it reaches a tier that has maps available. Locked maps that are adjacent to the map you're doing are in that pool of maps, and that's why you mostly obtain the locked maps from adjacent maps. In patch 3.2, there was a change. You are now twice as likely to obtain maps you have not yet completed on the Atlas as maps you have. What this means in practice is that if you have 2 locked adjacent maps available in that tier's pool, there's no change. 2 maps and it picks one of them. However, if you have one of those maps unlocked and the other one is still locked, it adds another locked map into the pool. So this leads to a chance of obtaining the locked map being 2 in 3 instead of 1 in 2. I will go more in depth on when you should or shouldn't use this information to your advantage later. Any map that is unlocked can drop while mapping as long as it's within drop level restrictions. And those restrictions are normal monsters and breakables drop up to +0 of the tier you're doing. So in an example, a normal monster in a tier 5 map will never be able to drop a tier 6 or higher map. Magic and rare monsters drop up to +1 and map bosses up to +2. It is important to note that if you do not have +2 to the tier of your running unlocked, the map will downgrade to +1 due to how map drops work. Some extra restrictions. A lot of the monsters added by league mechanics don't drop maps at all. And then some do drop, so it's very inconsistent and you just really have to know what monsters are able to drop maps. So for example, all unique monsters, that's Exiles, Beyond bosses, Breach bosses, Invasion bosses, etc. won't be able to drop maps. In most cases. Then, on top of that, every single Beyond monster is not able to drop maps. Normal Abyss monsters don't drop maps. Normal and Magic Breed monsters don't drop maps. But then we have Nemesis rare monsters and Bloodlines magic monsters that do drop maps. On top of that, we have Sextants that can add normal, magic and rare monsters that are able to drop maps, as long as they are not included in those specific cases where they cannot drop maps. Strongboxes can drop maps up to +5 levels when they have plus level modifiers on the boxes, as long as you have maps of those tiers unlocked. So if you don't, they downgrade again. Technically you can get a +6 with a lucky box with corruption on it, but that is very rare. Tier 1 maps can drop even if they are not unlocked in your Atlas. Atlas bonus increases the chances of a map to drop as a high level, however drop level restrictions still apply. This means that even if you have 120% bonus, which means that every map will upgrade by at least +1 and 20% of the time +2, white monsters still cannot drop a higher level than the map that you're running. So tier 5 normal monster won't be able to drop a tier 6 or 7. However, the Atlas bonus does allow you to sustain and build a map pool as if that same tier 5 monster would be dropping a tier 3 map, now it upgrades to tier 4 and in 20% cases also all the way to tier 5. Zana can sell locked maps and a higher level Zana will be able to sell higher level maps. While doing a Zana mission you can find any locked maps within drop level restrictions. Her shop will reset after you do her daily regardless if you complete it successfully or if it failed. So this means that you can just start the mission and abandon it right after. Leveling her up also resets the shop, so be sure to buy all the maps you need from her before leveling her up. And ideally you should never, at least early on your progression, level up Zana with a daily mission, as you will miss out on a refresh on the shop. And as a last tip from Zana, buy all maps Zana has before you do her first mission if possible, as she will level up from the first mission. 3 maps of the same type trade up into a adjacent +1 map. I refer to this as 3-1 or +1 recipe. Unique maps are considered its base map, so 3 tier 12 Acton's Nightmares will trade up into a tier 13 Desert Spring. In quite a few cases, a map has 2 different adjacent +1 maps, and in a few cases even 3, which means that only one of those maps can be obtained by the 3-1 recipe. Rules 1 and 2 allow us to increase the chances of getting that second or third map by a huge amount. Here's an example. We are doing tier 2 Flooded Mine map. It has an adjacent maps tier 3 Cells, Excavation, and Leyline. But 3 Flooded Mines trade into an Excavation. Let's say that we are only missing ley lines, so we need to farm it. If I have unlocked every tier 3 map in my atlas, except ley line, my chances of finding that ley line when a tier 3 map drops in a flooded mines is 2 in 11, because any of the tier 3 maps could drop. And if I haven't unlocked any tier 3 maps, my chances of finding that ley line when a tier 3 maps drops, it's now 1 in 3, as there are 3 adjacent tier 3 maps to flooded mines. Technically, I could have Cells and Excavation unlocked and completed for the Atlas bonus, as they don't harm my chances of finding that ley line as they are adjacent to flooded mines. Now you probably already figured out that in order to get all of the maps unlocked without wasting a lifetime, you can't unlock every single new map that you find immediately, as it will lower your chances at finding specific maps. There are a few other ways to obtain them mentioned later, but most of the times you obtain maps by trading them up with the 3-1 recipe, finding them while mapping, or buying the maps from Zana. Shape maps trade up to +1 adjacent map as its shaped version, so 3 tier 9 shape strands will trade up into a T10 shaped ancient city. Tier 15 shape maps are an exception to this, and they will trade up to tier 11 adjacent map of the base map. So a tier 15 shape siege will trade up, or I guess down, to a tier 11 colonnade. This is how it works right now, but hopefully it will be changed in the future. You can unshape/degrade map back to its base map by using an unshaping orb in Atlas. You can obtain unshaping orb by selling 20 cartographer's chisels and 5 orb of regrets to any vendor. Corrupting a map with a wall orb has 4 different outcomes. It can reroll the mods of the map, up to 8 mods, no change except add a corrupted tag to it, keep the mods of the map and make it unidentified, granting 30% bonus quantity, and +1 tier adjacent map. Tier 15 maps have a chance to upgrade into a tier 16 wall temple instead of the adjacent guardian map. Important to note that when corrupting shaped tier 15 maps, if they roll +1 tier, they can either turn to wall temple or to the adjacent tier 11 map. You can corrupt a map with wall orb to adjacent +1 map that you would not otherwise get from a 3-1 recipe. For example, a tier 10 bog will trade up to a tier 11 lair. However, when corrupting that map, it has a 50% chance that when it upgrades into a +1 to be primordial pool. Assuming all of the potential corruption outcomes are equal in chance, the chances of getting the desired adjacent non-3-1 map is usually 1 in 8. 1 in 4 to get the +1, and then 50% chance for the desired map. In some cases the chance is 1 in 12 when there is 3 adjacent maps and you need only one of them, and sometimes 1 in 6 if both of the adjacent maps from the map that has 3 of them are desired. For example, corrupting a flooded mines when you don't have either cells or leyline. Endgame labyrinth treasure chest at the end of the labyrinth will be able to drop lock maps up to T13. Some people say they received T14s, but I haven't seen any actual proof of this. And my personal experience and most people say that they have received up to T13. Unique cartographer Strombox called Empyrean Apparatus can drop any unique map, well, except maps that have specific restrictions on obtaining them, which are Perandus Manor from Kadiro, Wingtar Square from a Recipe, and Beachhead from using a Harbinger Orb on a map. Divination cards. Some monsters in special maps bypass normal drop restriction. For example, the final boss of Olmec Sanctum unique map has +4 levels to his drops, allowing him to drop up to +6 tiers higher map than the map itself. +2 the special mod, with +2 as being the map boss. Harbinger League introduced 2 new orbs that could modify maps. The League did not get added to the core game, but it may be possible to obtain these 2 orbs in the future if Harbinger gets added to Zana mods, or if there are other ways such as from sextants to encounter the Harbinger monsters. Harbinger Orb upgrades a map into a random +1 map and has a chance to turn the map into a unique map, the Beachhead. Orb of Horizons changes a map into a random map of the same tier. The unique maps are not included within the normal map drop pool, but they are considered unique items. So this means that increased item rarity and increased item quantity on the player will be able to increase the amount of unique maps you find, assuming the drop restrictions are met, of course. While these are not necessary in order to progress your atlas at all and actually slow you down when used early, I want to cover these due to most people watching this guide will probably end up shaping maps, and there are a few cool tricks to obtain the fragments. It's also useful general information. You receive Shaper's Memory Fragments that when you give to Zana, she gives you a Shaper's Orb that allows you to upgrade a map for +5 tiers. After doing this, this new map will be considered the higher level in the drop pool. So if you shape a Flooded Mines into a T7, now you need to meet the threshold of being able to drop a tier 7 map in order to find that map. So this means that you remove the tier 2 Flooded Mines from the drop pool. I will refer to the fragments as orbs as they are practically the same thing. There is a total of 15 Shaper Orbs, 1 orb for tiers 1 to 7, so a T1 Shaper Orb upgrades a map into a T6, and you need to run a T6 map in order to obtain the T1 orb. 2 orbs for tier 8, 3 orbs for tier 9 and T10. They're split into 2 different groups I like to separate. The first 10 orbs, 1 orb for T1 all the way to T10, and then the last 5 orbs, which are 1 orb for T8, 2 for T9 and 2 for T10. The last 5 could also be split into 2 different groups, as the orbs 11, 12 and 13 can be obtained from Guardians or Elder. However, the last 2 are only obtained from Elder himself. And after obtaining all 15 orbs, you will be able to get the Elder's Orb, which will allow you to upgrade any map into a T16. Orbs are obtained in a specific order or sequence. The first 10 go in a natural order of T1, T2, T3 all the way to T10, and then the last 5 go in an order of T8, T9, T10, then we go back to T9 and then another T10. This means that if you don't have a T2 orb yet, but run an Elder influenced T10 map, you will still obtain the T2 orb first. If you then run this map again right after, the next orb would be a T3. The very first orb is obtained from killing a map boss in a Shaper influence map that is at least T6, granted you have run enough Shaper influence map before that. The actual number needed to run before you can obtain your very first orb is unknown to me. However, from the 2 tests that I did for this guide, it seemed to be 6. And when you obtain your first orb, Elder will influence the map that you obtained the fragment from and few maps around it. This is very handy to know, as you can decide where you spawn Elder influence initially. It seems that you cannot alter what map Elder spawns later after you have removed him from your atlas by killing him later on, but you can alter the tier that he will respawn by running maps of those tiers that you want him to spawn. Another good reason to know why you can decide where to spawn Elder initially is that you can obtain the orbs 6 to 10, which require running T11 to T15 map, in shape maps. So you can decide what shape maps you run in order to obtain those orbs. More upon that later. After the first orb, the next 9 orbs, so until the end of the first 10 orbs, are obtained by running any Elder Influence maps of the appropriate level. You will get T2 orb by running Elder Influence T7 or higher, T5 orb from 10 or higher, and T10 orb from running a T15 map. After you have obtained the first 10 orbs, the next 5 orbs are a bit more tricky to get. Now the maps have to be occupied by Elder or his guardians, instead of just being Elder's influence, and they can only be obtained in actual native red maps, so you won't be able to get them by doing Elder or Elder Guardian shape maps. Elder occupies 5 maps in total after you have spread the influence to 20 maps, 4 for his guardians and 1 for himself. Then you have to kill the guardians and then you can face him. Now for the orbs. The 11th orb, or the second T8 orb, is obtained by doing any guardian or Elder in a native T13 or higher map. The 12th orb, or the second T9, is obtained by doing any guardian or Elder in a native T14 or higher map. The 13th orb, or the second T10, is obtained by doing any guardian or Elder in a native T15 map. 14th, or the third T9, is from Elder in a T14 or higher, and then the T15, or the third T10 orb, is obtained by doing Elder in a T15 map. A note for trading leagues. The first 10 orbs can be obtained / bought from other players running Elder influenced maps in their own atlases. So you can join someone who is running Elder influenced T15s and you can obtain orbs all the way to T10, but the last 5 orbs can only be obtained when Elder is occupying or his guardians are occupying maps in your own atlas. You can however get someone else to do the kills for you, but you have to get the occupation on your own atlas. I am not sure if it's intended that you cannot obtain the last 5 orbs from other people. And a few words before we actually dive into the part 2 of the guide, tier by tier method. Try to complete the bonus on every map while unlocking if you can. However, for red maps you should always try to unlock it first, because it has to be a rare and corrupted, and sometimes corrupting a map can make it nearly impossible to run or straight up change it to a different map. During the progression, remember to use 3-to-1 or +1 recipe to obtain new maps and to check Zana every time she levels or you do her daily mission for maps. Also corrupt maps that can +1 into a map that is otherwise hard to obtain if you don't have a dire need for wall orbs and your build can do harder maps. Alch maps the moment you feel you can do so. Alching even T1 maps is definitely worth it, especially when it comes to map progression. If you feel you're short on alchs, at least alch the maps that are adjacent to the hard to obtain maps. Also keep in mind you might not get the perfect progression in your atlas, but I am showcasing ways to get optimal route / order to go if you want to optimize your chances at finding the maps that you can't obtain from 3-to-1 recipe. There are a few different methods and I will showcase 2 general ways to do it, the tier by tier and the map by map methods. After those I will show other different ways to use the rules of obtaining maps. The reason I am showcasing the tier by tier despite it not being very good is it's the bread and butter of the progression, and it's a very good way to understand and see how the rules are applied in practice. If you're confused at any point during the guide on why something works like it does or how something is done, please check the part 1 again. Everything is done within those rules. And if you're still confused, just ask me and I'm more than happy to help. I will try my best to explain things as clearly as possible, so just by rewatching this guide or reading the written guide, especially the part 1, you should be able to understand everything. The idea is very simple. Do not run a map of a certain tier before you obtain every map of said tier. You don't necessarily have to find every map, you can do 3-to-1 upgrades, etc, etc. The reason I showcase this method, even though it's not ideal to use as is that it's very simple to understand and I want to highlight its flaws. I have noticed a lot of people think it's a good way to progress, and it just isn't if you aim to progress fast. So in an example, complete all T1s, since they are unlocked by default. Do not run a single tier 2 map before you have obtained all T2 maps. Do not run a single T3 map before you have obtained all T3 maps. And this keeps going until do not run a single T10 map before you obtain all T10 maps, and so on and so on. Very simple. At lowest tiers, this is a valid way to progress without any issues. However, it limits you from finding +2 maps from bosses ever, and that would actually affect your progression. Example, you're currently farming T5 maps, you can't run a T6 map as you haven't obtained all of them yet, so naturally you can't ever get a T7 map. I guess you can technically get a +2 map if you corrupt strongboxes with plus levels and your +1 map turns into a +2, but it's very uncommon that non-cartographers strongboxes even drop maps. The more maps the next tier has, the more difficult, read slow, it becomes to obtain all of those maps before you can progress, and that is the biggest flaw. Let's take a look when we are at tier 8 maps. There are 11 different maps in both tiers 8 and 9, and you can only find few T9s from any T8 map due to adjacent lock map rule. The more T8 maps you have in your pool, the less likely you are to find a specific T8 map that you must farm for its adjacent T9 map. Gladly, there is only one map in tier 9 that is not obtained through a 3-to-1 recipe. The map is Temple. But by just looking at this map alone, we realize that we should prioritize farming the adjacent T8 map in order to find it sooner, as other maps are available from 3-to-1 recipe. Later on, the 11 plus maps, this method becomes somewhat valid again, as there are no more hard to obtain maps past the 11 primordial pool. You can argue that it's not the optimal way to do even at those tiers, especially if you're planning on progressing to a specific map for farming Atlas bases, for example Park for Steel Rings, or if you're aiming to farm a specific Guardian, for example Chimera for the Scourge Claw. The difference with this method that instead of going tier by tier, we are targeting specific hard to obtain maps in specific tiers. After we get those maps, we progress further. There are a total of 12 of these maps. 2 in T2 maps, 4 in T3 maps, no maps in T4 to T5, and then 1 map in each tiers T6 to T11. Early Atlas will feel slow, especially if you get unlucky and don't get a single T3 map from Zana early on, but it will get a lot better once you get all the T3 maps. So the start is the same, we complete all T1 maps, since they are unlocked by default. We farm Beach and Lookout, and we farm those until we obtain Arid Lake and Pen. After you get those, you can now unlock Flooded Mines, Marshes and Oliveways. Then T2 to T5, so we start with farming Flooded Mines, Marshes and Oliveways to obtain Cells, Leyline, Burial Chambers and Port. After we get those, we can unlock every single T2, T3 and T4 maps. A small note about unlocking T4 maps: aim to unlock Chateau first, as it's the adjacent map for Toxic Sewer, which we need to farm soon. Tier 5. The first T5 map you should unlock is Toxic Sewer, as the next hard to obtain map is Phantasmagoria. Farm Toxic Sewer until you obtain Phantasmagoria. Unlock Academy. And after you unlock Academy, you can unlock rest of the T5 maps. Farm Academy until you obtain Gardens. After obtaining Gardens, unlock Underground River. After unlocking Underground River, you may unlock rest of the T6 maps. Farm Underground River until you obtain Mineral Pools. After obtaining Mineral Pools, unlock Courtyard. After that, you can unlock rest of the T7 maps and farm Courtyard until you find Temple. After obtaining Temple, either unlock Estuary, Tower, or both, as they are both adjacent to Shipyard. After that, you can unlock rest of the T8. And after obtaining Shipyard, you can unlock rest of the T9 maps. Unlock Bog. Farm until you obtain Primordial Pool, and once you get your hands on Primordial Pool, you have obtained all of the hard to obtain maps, and at this point you can progress however you want. Remember when in part 1 there was a mention that Zana can sell unlocked maps and that you can corrupt maps to their +1 adjacent map that you don't get from 3-1 upgrade recipe? Yep, those two things alone will let you completely ignore part 2 and part 3 if you play enough and are able to corrupt maps and still run them. I did not want to say that earlier because understanding the basics are very essential to even know why and what map should be corrupted. If you don't know the hard to obtain maps, you don't know what maps you should corrupt in the first place. However, I won't advise to completely throw out the previous methods out of the window, but rather combine the map by math method with everything I'm about to say in this part of the guide. Of course, a lot of what you can do depends on your build's limits and strengths, so don't corrupt your maps if you have trouble even running rare maps, because often the map might turn into something that you can't run, and you just have to either wait until you obtain 3 of those for the 3-1 recipe, or save for later. It only affects locked maps in comparison to unlocked maps, so it will not increase the overall amount of maps that drop. It will not make more maps upgrade into a higher tier, as this would mean it would also downgrade maps to a lower tier when running a higher map with a lower adjacent being locked. So the only effect this new rule will have is within a specific tier and the chance of a locked map dropping in at that tier versus unlocked map dropping in that tier. Let's go back to Toxic Sewer. No T6 is unlocked, so we have Cemetery and Phantasmagoria available to drop when we run Toxic. When a +1 drops, the chance of it being either of them is 1 in 2. The new rule means that every locked map just has a second map in the pool of maps available from the tier. And when you unlock a map, the second map will be removed from that pool. So, in the case of the Toxic again, when Cemetery and Phantasmagoria are both locked, they both have 2 maps in that pool. So 2 of the 4 are Cemetery, and the other 2 are Phantasmagoria. So it's still 1 in 2 chance to find either of them. Unlock either of them, and the result will be 2 of the locked and 1 of the unlocked. So now the locked map has a chance of 2 in 3, which is twice as high as the unlocked chance, which is 1 in 3. And when you add another random T6 to the same pool with Cemetery and Phantasmagoria, the new chances would be 2 in 4 for the locked, 1 in 4 for both of the unlocked. Back to the Toxic Sewer example. We unlocked Cemetery to increase our chances at finding Phantasmagoria slightly. After we obtain the Phantasmagoria, we now have to farm Academy for the Gardens. And since we have to unlock the Academy to make sure that we get enough maps to actually farm for the Gardens, we have now made the chance of finding Academies lower. So instead of every map from Conservatory being a Academy, half the time it will also be a Cemetery. This means less maps to farm for Gardens. You could technically remove the cemetery from your atlas, however it's very costly to do so, especially if you do it every tier. It also has a downside where if you have a specific map and you're trying to obtain that map from lower maps with no +1 adjacents unlocked, you're a lot less likely to find the map you want. Example, I want to run a T9 scriptoriums. It is my only unlocked T9, however, I'm running other tier 8 because +1 map can be a scriptorium. Now if there is 2 adjacent maps to that random T8 that I'm running, I will have 1 in 5 chance instead of 1 in 3 to find a scriptorium. Scriptorium will still be only maps that can drop from T11 or higher maps. In the same way, if you want to run some nation-bred maps, but not their adjacent maps, you're more likely to find those adjacent rather than other maps of the same tier. Example, I want to run Parks, which is a tier 13, but I absolutely hate Villa, which is its adjacent tier 12. So I leave it logged so it won't drop from elsewhere in the atlas. Let's say I have 3 other random T12s in my atlas. Whenever I run Park, my chances of finding that villa is 2 in 5 instead of 1 in 4, and the other maps have a drop chance of 1 in 5 instead of 1 in 4. While I will still obtain more non-villas from the Park, I will be obtaining more villa than I would without this rule. And then let's take a few cases where it's actually useful. Early on during the progression, where we're still farming for T3 hard to obtain maps. After we obtain cells, ley line and port, and we only have burial chambers left from marshes, we can now unlock springs, and since it's our only unlocked map, and burial is the last hard map from that tier, and both are adjacent to marshes, we now have increased our chance of finding that from 1 in 2 to 2 in 3. The reason it's useful here is that there is no hard to obtain map in a tier 4, so it doesn't hurt our chance at finding a map that doesn't exist. You can use the example above for the harder T3 maps as well if you find burial chambers earlier. You can make your chance of finding port and the second map from flooded mines 2 in 4 or 1 in 2 instead of 1 in 3. We skip some hard to obtain maps because they can drive you crazy, but we want to get them later. Let's use ley line as an example. We either obtained volcano from Zana or from sulfur vents while running it. We can now shape it to T9 and be able to run T9 maps while eventually hopefully obtaining the last T3 we are missing. So instead of the normal chance which is 1 in 10, we actually have 2 in 11, which is nearly twice as high. You could also shape flooded mines or just run those adjacent maps whenever you get them. The reason I wanted to mention shaping the volcano at T9 is that if during your progression you didn't actually unlock every map in T9, so maybe you didn't obtain enough 3-to-1s for the recipe or whatever, you can obtain more T9 volcanoes than you could obtain T4 volcanoes. So this change makes the punishment of skipping hard to obtain maps during progression a lot smaller. On the flip side of it being bad for you, if you want to run only few specific native red maps, it's also a good thing if you are now trying to obtain those while having other maps of the same tier unlocked. So you don't need to remove the other maps in order to progress or have a lower chance. You're still more likely to obtain those maps if you had no maps in the same tier, however it allows you to progress more corners at somewhat same speed. It won't feel nearly as bad unlocking one or few T11s on the other side of the atlas while wanting to find another T11 on the other side. Extension to part 3, map by map method. In part 3 we farm specifically one map at a time. This is actually not necessary, and you can actually farm 2, 3 or even 4 maps at once. This will likely slow your progression in the lower tier you're farming by a bit, but speed up the other tiers and let you build slightly higher map pool earlier. If that sounds confusing, here's an example. Instead of just farming for Phantasmagoria, we can preemptively already farm for gardens and mineral pools as well. So instead of having Toxic Sewer as our only unlock T5 map, we can also unlock Conservatory, which then leads to Academy, into Gardens, Maze, which leads into Underground Sea, Underground River into Mineral Pools. This means that instead of almost every T5 map dropping as Toxic Sewer, we will be getting Conservatories and Mazes as well. And then T6 drop as Phantasmagoria, hopefully from Toxic Sewer, Academy and Underground Sea. And a potential +2 drop from Toxic or Maze or Conservatory could be Underground River, so we're not wasting +2 drops by downgrading them to +1. And if you want to be really clever and got a bit lucky with Zana, you can actually skip unlocking Maze, Conservatory, and potentially even Underground Sea too. Now you would have Toxic Sewer as your only T5, Academy as your only T6, and Underground River as your only T7. Chances of setting your Atlas like this in Soul Self-Fun is very slim, but hey, I just wanted to include it in the case of what if. Some people like to push to a specific corner of the Atlas for various reasons. Chimera for farming Scourge Claws, Bark for Steel Rings, Pantheon upgrades from red maps and so on. If any of those are your primary goal, you can slow down your general Atlas progression a bit and speed up your goals by keeping your progression on tiers in your desired corners a few maps higher than the rest. I don't advise to do this before you reach at least these 7 maps, but hey, maybe there's a specific thing you want to do I don't cover here. Example, pushing to Chimera for farming Scourge Claw. I have followed the general progression, part 3 or part 4.1, up to T8 maps. Now there are only 3 maps, Temple, Shipyard and Primordial Pool, left from the hard to obtain maps. As all of these maps are at least T9, the chances of me eventually corrupting them or getting them from Zana is actually pretty good, because running plus T10 maps still drop quite a lot of lower maps, so I can just always corrupt my courtyards, estuary and towers, and box hoping for the +1 adjacent upgrade. I immediately unlock Lair or Promenade. Both of these T11 maps lead to Chimera, and only one of them. This way, every time it drops, I can either run it, hope for +1, corrupt it, again hoping for +1, and if the corruption makes it too hard, I can save it for 3-1 recipe. I will keep this corner at least 2 maps up of others, so that whenever I'm running a T9 map in a different corner of the Atlas, the only T11 that can drop is now the one I have unlocked on Chimera side. Once I obtain the T12 of that side, I can progress other corners to T10, get T13 of that side, progress to 11 on others, etc. You can extend this to be more than 2 tiers different, of course, but I personally feel 2 tiers difference is the sweet spot and you can still maintain a decent bonus. In the part 1, rules of obtaining maps, part of the guide I mentioned the rules of obtaining memory fragments. So memory fragments 2 to 10 can be obtained by running any Elder Influence map. For fragments 2 to 5 it doesn't really matter, as the second one comes from a minimum of a T7 and the 5th comes from a T10. However, in order to obtain fragments 6 to 10 you normally have to run red maps, so T11 for T6 orb, T15 for T10 orb, which for a lot of people who prefer shape Atlas strategies can be quite the annoyance, as you have to lock maps after getting the fragments. Because any Elder Influence map works for the first 10 orbs, we can actually run Elder Influenced shaped T11 to T15 maps to obtain those fragments. So the method is very simple. You obtain the T5 fragment from a T10 map, shape a T5 map in the area that you have your Elder Influence to T10. Once you find this new T10 shaped map, you can try to corrupt it for a +1 adjacent, or wait until you obtain 3 of them and do the 3-1 recipe. For example, T10 shaped conservatory will give you a T11 shaped academy. Make sure that academy, or whatever the T11 is for you, is influenced by Elder, and then run it. After you kill the boss, you will obtain the next fragment. And if you want to really optimize this, you should try to avoid killing monsters in this T11 map before you have killed the boss and shaped your preferred T6 into a T11, so you can actually drop that map while killing monsters in that T11. However, if you have a native T11 or 12 map in your atlas already, this is not important. After you have obtained the orb from your shape map, you can unshape it and shape a different map that you prefer to run, as it's probably in a different quadrant than your Elder influence is now. And then you repeat this until you obtain T10 orb from a shaped T15 map. Red maps don't grow in trees, so if we have every single map in our atlas unlocked, it may be very difficult to sustain a decently sized red map pool to farm red Elder consistently. To make it easier, we only unlock 1 or 2 different quadrants of the red maps. You need 20 maps in total influenced by Elder before he occupies maps, so we aim to get as many red maps as possible, without many yellows, of course. And the best place for that is Hydra plus Chimera quadrant. If you have all red maps of those quadrants unlocked, you can connect a total of 18 red maps plus 2 yellow. The yellows usually being box plus face pool. This way the chance for Elder to spawn on a red map is fairly good. Hopefully this guide was useful. Again, let me know if you spot any mistakes. I'll try to add a note about them into the description. Also, let me know if there are any other guides you might like to see in the future that are Atlas related. I mean, if you ever got this far in the first place. Yeah. Bye!